So John, Greg was Army Ranger.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I had no interest in going to Ranger School. I did not need the U.S. Army's help to be miserable and starved for 50 days.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know if you know much about Army Ranger School, but in general, Marines give Army guys a pretty hard time about the ease of their schools. Does not apply to Ranger School. School is one of the most difficult schools in any of the U.S. militaries to get through. They literally torture you and starve you for, was it 55 days or 58 days?
Yeah, 60 days.
60?
So
Guys come out of Ranger School, honestly, looking like they just got released from a POW camp.
Yeah, guys losing 30, 40 pounds is not uncommon. So so right before graduation on your last day, that's when you do your final weigh-in. And that day for me was 9/11. So
is that right?
Yep, that was my last day of Ranger School.
Wow.
They said, hey guys, we need to bring you in the auditorium. You got something to take a look at.
Yeah, guess what?
Yeah, guess what? You're all going to war. So
wow, so that's the best way to cut weight is to sign up for.
I don't know about the best way.
Yeah, it's an effective way.
Yeah, everyone's sick and has cellulitis, and yeah, it's nasty by the end of Ranger School. Because the last phase, you're down in Eglin Air Force Base, and so you're in the swamps for 3 weeks straight. So yeah, you come out of that pretty nasty.
John, what belt did you get to?
Purple.
You're just like me, stuck at purple for life.
I stopped wearing the belt. I stopped wearing a gi about my last 3 years. Once the no gi thing kind of got popular, I had no interest in wearing a gi anymore. I remember Hagen told me, hey, wear your gi in tomorrow so I can promote you.
Well, the funny thing was with me, Higgins, I did kind of the same thing. I started doing no gi more. And Higgins was like, it's kind of hard to get promoted if you don't put the gi on. And I was like, eh. And then Higgins moved to Hollywood, and I stopped training.
See, it was the opposite for me. Like, I hated the gi until I was a brown belt. Because I got into jiu-jitsu through the whole MMA scene and did some fights and preferred, like, all of my gi techniques were no gi techniques. But I would still train with a gi on. And then at brown belt, I actually fell in love with the gi because I wanted to get away from the MMA stuff and getting hit in the head all the time. And for me, I feel like there's more longevity in the gi.
Oh, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Yeah, back in my younger days, I was a pretty good athlete. So the gi just slowed me down. Everything the gi took away from me.
Uh-huh.
Which I did well, the speed and athleticism, really the no gi game was a much better fit.
Yeah.
But now that I'm old,
yeah, it might be time to revisit the gi.
Much different story. Yeah, I prefer the gi game for sure.
Are you training anymore, John?
I'm not, but I've kind of thought about it a little bit. I had a neck fusion, and then after that, I came back and tried to continue to grapple and tore my pec in half. I said, and then it took so much away from my game. It wasn't fun anymore. Guys who I used to dominate and really easily could now hang with me or even beat me, and that was just no fun. I lost 2 giant steps and just said, this is no fun anymore. But now my daughters are 8 and 11. I live in Spokane, and there's a couple of good jiu-jitsu schools up. So I probably won't, but I might. But I'm going to definitely get both the girls into jiu-jitsu.
For sure.
Summertime starts for sure.
Was that is that Cascal Jiu-Jitsu up there? Yeah.
Yeah, James Weed is a black belt up there.
Yeah,
he's got a handful of black belts in there.
Yeah, he's come up to my academy a couple times. I met some of his black belts. They're good people.
Do you know who he is, Kenny?
I don't.
You know what's interesting about James Weed is he resembles Rick a lot. Williams.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they look like brothers. They could be brothers. It's funny.
I was in Orange County at the UFC gym. I don't know what I was doing there. But anyways, I saw Rick, and he didn't recognize me. I don't know why. It's because I don't have a black belt. I understand.
Yeah.
Did you know
he doesn't want to talk to lowlifes like you, for sure.
Did you know that Rick used to bodyguard for Kobe?
Oh, I know that. Oh, yeah, you bet.
Yeah, I didn't find that out until after.
No, he did that for years, many, many years.
Hmm. Okay, well, since not Pedro, Brian hasn't showed up, but we'll just go ahead and start. I mean, I'll probably leave this stuff on because it's kind of interesting. But anyways, let's go ahead and start with Greg. Greg, can you tell us how you got started in jiu-jitsu and where you started?
Yeah, it's actually a pretty interesting story. I was deployed to
Wait,
Iraq.
wait, let me stop you.
Yep.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a Grapple TV podcast. I forgot to mention that. And I'm here with Greg Anderson. And I am here. Well, Greg Anderson's a former Ranger, Army Ranger. And I'm also have John Brumbauch, I can't say his name right today, a former Marine sniper. And we're going to talk a little military and a little jiu-jitsu and whatever else comes up. And so let's go ahead and talk to Greg about how he got started in jiu-jitsu, MMA, and all that.
Yeah, so it was a pretty interesting story. It was 2004, and I was deployed to Ramadi, Iraq. And the base we were living on is a little base called Blue Diamond, and there was a Navy SEALs living there. And one of them asked me, he was like, hey, you want to get some training in tonight? I'm like, yeah, what do you do? He goes, I do jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai. And at the time, he was a purple belt. And I was, good shape, and I was about 215 pounds and felt like I knew how to fight. And you know what happens when a purple belt goes against a guy that doesn't train. He absolutely made me feel like a baby. And I mean, people always say check your ego at the door, but my ego got me into jiu-jitsu because I was like, I cannot allow another man to be able to do this to me. And I started training with him every single day. And then when I redeployed home, I signed up at 2 gyms. I signed up at a gi jiu-jitsu academy and then an MMA gym as well, and just started immersing myself in it. So,
and what gyms were those?
Originally, I was at a Gracie Baja gym. It was called North Sound Jiu Jitsu. It was a little north of Seattle, and I was there for a long time. And then for work, I got stationed in Los Angeles, and I moved down there. That's when my eyes really opened up to what jiu-jitsu is, because it's a different animal down there for sure. And I joined. It was actually interesting. I was looking for gyms that were close to my commute from home to work, and I found a little gym in Corona, California, a checkmat gym, and walked inside just to check it out. And it was Buchecha running it at the time. And it was before he won the world titles. So he was relatively unknown, and ended up training with him for years down there. So it was pretty cool how that worked out.
Did you know who he was at that time?
No, I didn't. Like, I enjoyed training and fighting and competing, but I didn't follow sport jiu-jitsu. The sport jiu-jitsu scene up in Seattle at the time, because this was 2010, it just wasn't as big as it is today. So, yeah, I wasn't familiar with who he was or any of the top players, really. And like I said, moving to California was an eye-opener because I was a brown belt when I moved. And the blue and purple belts down there were giving me problems. I remember telling Marcus right away, I was like, hey, if you want me to start back over at white belt, please do. Like, that won't hurt my feelings for a second. And he's like, hey, once you get a belt, no one can take that away from you. So just train as hard as you can, represent your belt, and have fun. And so I was a brown belt for 5 years with those guys down there before I got my black belt. So it was pretty cool.
Who gave you your black belt?
So when Marcus became like a superstar, he decided to devote more of his time to training and close the gym in Corona. And I started training out of Huntington Beach with Joao Assis. And I met Joao through Marcus because they're good friends and they're both on Team Checkmat. And so I was with him. I'm still under him to this day, but that's who I got my black belt under.
So you you had 2 big, giant ADCC instructors. I mean, that must have influenced your game a lot.
Oh, it was incredible. I was so fortunate. And the funny thing is like, people that aren't familiar with jiu-jitsu and fighting, they think a black belt's a black belt. And I was like, no, there's black belts that eat black belts, and those are those guys.
Definitely different levels.
Yeah, like, because I own an academy now north of Seattle, and one of my students asked me, he's like, hey, when you roll with those guys, Is it about 50-50? And I was like, let me just clarify something to you right now. It's 100-0 out of 100 fights, and they're submitting me however they want. Like, it is what it is, you know?
John, go ahead and tell us about your jiu-jitsu journey.
Yeah, well, my story is similar to Greg's, actually. I was a police officer in Torrance, California at the time. It was 1996, and the Machados at that time were teaching a class over at Gold's Gym. At that time, I was a pretty big guy, too. I was probably 235 pounds or so, and had wrestled a bit and boxed a bit and thought I was pretty tough. And one of my fellow copper buddies goes, hey, come up and check out this jiu-jitsu stuff. I'm like, all right. Now, this is 96, so I'd never heard of it. You know, the UFC, it was just an infant, and nobody knew anything. So I go over there. The first guy I wrestled with is a black belt, Renato Magno, yeah. So, and Renato is very skilled, but not the most intimidating-looking guy. And back in those days, of course, if you were the bigger, stronger guy, you had you were going to most likely win. So Renato immediately throws me on the ground, mounts me, and starts talking to his friends in Portuguese. As I'm under him, at the time I could bench press 400 pounds plus, and there was no way I was going to muscle him around. I mean, you know what happened. I'm a brand new guy, and the guy's a black belt. So much like you, Greg, I thought, look, I have to learn this stuff. So then I immersed myself in it as well, primarily under Higan Machado. But also I started to recognize in those days there was a major, major gap in the gi stand-up game. So I quickly lost interest in the gi when I started training with Frank Trigg and Vladimir Matashenko over there at Raw. And kind of did a hybrid at that time, a hybrid no gi game. So I'd go to Higgins' class, warm up with the gi on, take the gi off, wrestle with whoever I could, doing jiu-jitsu type stuff, and then go over to the Raw and learn wrestling.
So this is a question for both of you. So I remember when I first started in jiu-jitsu, I would get put in positions and like quit. So like somebody was scissoring my head with their legs and I tapped. And I remember looking at Higan and he looked at me and he just kind of shook his head like, bro, what are you doing? You know? I quickly learned that, okay, I could have fought it a little bit harder. And I'm assuming you guys coming from the military background, that you guys were already in those tough troubles, so you guys weren't tapping as quickly as I would. Is there any truth to that?
I would say even in the special operations community, fighting is a different animal. Like, people think because you're a Ranger or SEAL, you know how to fight. They teach you to fight with your weapons and with your squad and with fire and maneuver. But as far as hand-to-hand, I mean, they dabble in it. And from what I understand, it's becoming more of a thing. But when I was in, if you wanted to learn to fight, you had to take it upon yourself. And so when I started training, I'm sure it was the same thing that you experienced. I remember, to this day, I remember tapping to a lockdown because I thought my calf was going to explode and I didn't understand what was going on. And, or when you get a guy that has knee on belly and you can't move and it starts to incite that panic response. I think everybody has that in them. And that's what I always tell my team. Like, the reason why live rolling is so good is because it allows you to develop comfort in uncomfortable situations. And if you haven't had someone mounted on top of you or someone knee on belly, you're not familiar with what that feels like, panic is going to ensue. I think no matter who you are, you have to condition that out of yourself.
Yeah, and then being able to move out of it helps too.
Yep.
Where's your academy at, Greg?
It's Lake Stevens, Washington. We're about a 30-minute drive north of downtown Seattle.
Yeah, I know where you're at. I'm in Spokane.
Okay. Yeah, that's right.
Has the military experience helped you in any way in doing throughout your jiu-jitsu career?
I would almost say the opposite is more true with most people, is that jiu-jitsu helps people with their military career. And you hear it all the time from veterans or people across the whole spectrum, I suppose, about jiu-jitsu saved my life. You hear that a lot. But in the veteran community, something that they don't talk about in regards to like PTSD and depression, and a lot of things that veterans face. Yeah, a lot of it's combat related, but a big part of it is being part of something, having a brotherhood, having a mission, having people that support you. And then one day you go from that to just stocking shelves at Home Depot. And that's a tough pill to swallow. And I know a lot of guys have found that camaraderie and that feeling of belonging to something through jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And unlike a lot of other martial arts or sports activities, you don't have to be a very good athlete to be a really good jiu-jitsu player. You may not be a champion, but you can be, the dad bod guy with no speed, not very strong. You spend your time in a gi, and you're going to be tapping out all the muscle heads in the gym for sure.
Yep.
So virtually anybody who has 2 arms and 2 legs, maybe even not, can still do jiu-jitsu.
Yep.
Well, I can attest to that. I was always very athletic, and I started at the IMB Academy, which is Dan Santo and Richard Bastiles. And I forgot the other guy, Martinez. So I was doing a little kickboxing, Muay Thai, collie sticks. And I used to play basketball and football, baseball. So I went to, when I went to my first class, I had already watched some of those Gracie, not Gracie in action tapes, but the Gracie fundamentals, I guess. So I know how to do a key lock and maybe an arm bar or something. And then when I walked in the class, I looked at these guys. I was probably 205 pounds at the time, 6'2". And I'm looking at these guys, and they're most of them were 175, 7, 8, 9. And I was like, oh, man, I'm about to kill these guys. And, yeah, my first roll, I got demolished in like 15 seconds. And then it was this guy who probably was like 40, maybe 45. No, he was probably like 50. And he demolished me, and he just kept tapping me really quick. I think I've learned this over the time, but I think what happens is you go there as a white belt and you get killed by everybody. Then as the new people come in, and you just start destroying them. So I think what happened with that guy was he never destroyed anybody before. So when he got his hands on me, he paid for all those times. But I definitely think, man, that old adage, what is it? Don't trust a book by its cover. That's really real interesting.
Oh yeah, no, you can't do that anymore at all. You have no idea who you're looking at or messing with.
It's funny you say that, Kenny, because I talk to my students about that all the time. Because when a new person joins, and they feel like a fish out of water for a month or two, but then they continuously just get smashed because the blue belts that are smashing them are also progressing and getting better, and we're all growing at the same level. So the guy on the bottom a lot of times doesn't realize how good he's getting until that new guy off the street shows up. And that's like his opportunity to be like, oh yes, this is what I can do. So that's probably what you were experiencing that day.
Oh, absolutely. And I remember, this is pretty silly, but my cousin probably weighed 145 pounds. And we used to wrestle. He used to destroy me. It sounds crazy. I was just not a good grappler. And after doing jiu-jitsu for about, 3 or 4 months, we were wrestling again, and I was destroying him. And I was having so much fun. I was pushing his face into the carpet and rubbing his call me daddy,
Yeah.
And I had another friend who his brother was younger than him, but he was like 230 pounds, maybe 215. I'll take that back. But he was short and stocky. And he was asking me about jiu-jitsu, and I was like, yeah, it's pretty effective. And he was like, I don't think I really need jiu-jitsu. And he says, let's roll. Of course, he didn't say roll, but whatever he said. I said, okay. And as a jiu-jitsu guy, you always want to roll now. So it's like, somebody's challenging me. All right, let's roll. And man, I remember I took his back and was like spinning on his back. Like he did turtle guard. He didn't know what he was doing, but I was spinning on his back. And then I actually pulled off an arm bar, and then I let it go. And he said, why'd you let it go? And I said, because I was about to hurt your arm. He said, no. I would have got out of it. So I said, okay, let's just go back into that position. And I said, just yell when it starts to hurt. So I got him back in the arm bar, and I just squeezed and put my pelvis up a little bit, and then, yeah! And I was like, man, this is for real right here, I don't
Yeah,
know
one
if
of
I'll
the
have
cool things about jujitsu is you learn techniques right away that you can instantly employ.
Yep.
Basic, kimura, armbar, triangle chokes. Those are all basic things that aren't real hard to pull off, particularly against someone who has no, knowledge against them.
absolutely. Let's get a
Yeah.
little more into your. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, you said your cousin was a wrestler and you were able
No,
to
no, no,
out,
no.
or
He wasn't even a wrestler.
oh, he wasn't a wrestler.
No,
Okay,
he was just some scrappy little kid from North Carolina,
got it.
which makes it even worse.
Uh
I may cut,
huh.
I may cut that part out. Yeah, he was a wrestler, Division One.
Yeah.
let's,
Uh,
let's talk a little bit about your military background. Um, Great. What made you decide? Well, first of all, I'm going to talk about Brian Mendez, who's not here right now. I don't know where he is. He was supposed to be on the show, but I interviewed him before. And Brian was in high school when 9/11 happened, or he had just got out of high school, and he signed up because of 9/11. I thought that was, I mean, that's very patriotic.
yeah,
I
for
would
sure.
I would never do anything. I wouldn't even go in the military just because I'm scared like that. But I thought that was very patriotic, you know. And by the way, I want to thank you guys for serving our country because, something that I wouldn't do. And I know that because of what you guys did, a lot of the freedom that we have today, well, not the freedom we have as of last month, but the normal
Yeah,
freedoms that we have, it's because of you guys. So I appreciate that. I'm sure a lot
I
of the
appreciate hearing it.
do too. But go ahead and tell us about your military experience.
So I wish I could say that I had like some patriotic vision or some burning desire to serve my country, but the truth is, I hated school. Through high school, I liked to party and fight and just be ridiculous, and no part of me wanted to continue school. And so I just thought, well, if I don't want to continue in education, the military would be a good route. So I looked into some things and I said to myself, you know what, if you're going to go in for 4 years, you might as well try and get as much as you can out of it in those 4 years and do something and challenge yourself as hard as you can. And I joined as just an infantryman. I got an airborne infantry contract. I was going to go to the 82nd Airborne. So I went down to Fort Benning, Georgia. That's where my basic and AIT was. And then in airborne school, a guy showed up and he's like, hey, and we were in formation. He's like, who here is interested in trying to be an Army Ranger? We're taking volunteers. If you're interested, fall out to the rear of the formation. So I was like, oh, okay, we'll see what this is all about.
Like spur of the moment.
Well, no, you know that they say that the Ranger recruiters will look to people in airborne school and give you an opportunity. So I was expecting this moment to come at some point, but I didn't know how it was going to play out. They said, okay, if you want to try, you have to go through a program called RIP. It's a Ranger Indoctrination Program. So they said, grab your gear, throw it on that 5-ton and fall out in formation. And then they took us on a death run right there on the spot, like all the way back to Ranger Regiment, which isn't too far from airborne school, but they make sure I found out later that how they do that is they take the fastest guy in the Ranger Regiment to pick up the Rangers to make sure that everybody falls out of the run, But yeah, then I went through Indoc. It was only 3 weeks back then. It's 8 weeks now because this was pre 9/11. And then they send you to your battalion, and I went to 2nd Battalion out at Fort Lewis. You do your time as a private there, and then they send you to Ranger School. And once you graduate that, you get promoted to E4, and then you can become a NCO after that. But you have to have a Ranger tab in the regiment to become an NCO. So it's a prerequisite.
Can you explain to us what an E4 is?
It's just it's the basic rank structure. It's E1 through E9 in the Army for enlisted people. You start out as a private, and then you move up. And an E4 is considered a specialist or a corporal. And then E5 is when you become a sergeant. And that's when you're considered a non-commissioned officer because those are leadership positions.
Did you ever get to that E5?
Yeah, I was. I got to E5, and then after I left the regiment, I went warrant officer and went to the flight program, and I ended up hemorrhaging my retina while I was in flight school. So I was medically discharged after that. They said any injury to your eye in aviation is a no-go. So that was the end of my military career. And then, like I said, I did the contract thing for the next 5 years.
So you were going to be a pilot, or?
Yeah, I was going to fly helicopters. I was down in Fort Rucker, and that's where I went to the warrant officer course. And then I was in flight school when I got injured. I was going to fly 47s, which are the big helicopters with the dual rotors.
So you were going to be driving in or flying into hostile areas, dropping people off, or?
Yeah, those are primarily transport helicopters. So moving people and supplies. I wanted Blackhawks, but back in those days, beggars couldn't be choosers. And there were several different ways to get to flight school. You could go in and go needs of the Army, or you could be sponsored by a unit. And if a unit says, yes, we want to pick you up and hire you as a pilot, then they'll send you down there. And I had a unit that was willing to sponsor me, and that unit flew 47s. So that's what airframe I was going to be assigned to.
John, why don't you go ahead and tell us about your situation?
Well, much like Greg, I had no interest in high school. Got terrible grades, partied, got in trouble, etc. But knew that I couldn't continue to do that throughout the rest of my life. So kind of an interesting story, Greg may find this interesting, is the principal at my high school at the time was a 2-star general in the Army Reserves. He was the 7th man in Army history to go from private to 2-star general. He got a battlefield commission in Korea, went up the hill as a sergeant and came down as a lieutenant. So my dad was in the Marine Corps too and told me, look, don't join the Marine Corps. They get the worst duty stations. They get promoted the slowest. They get all the crap duties. Don't join the Marine Corps. But I'd been shooting my whole life since I was about 5 years old and had shot competitively even at that time in high school. So I really wanted to be a sniper. So my principal's name was Mr. Reynolds. I go ask him, Mr. Reynolds, am I joining the Army or the Marine Corps? Which do you recommend? Fully expecting a 2-star general in the Army say, hey, join the Army. But he asked me, he said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to be a sniper. He said, join the Marine Corps. They're the best snipers in the world.
Hands down.
So there you go. So that's why I ended up joining the Marine Corps. It took me a long time to get into sniper school. Marine Corps does not really guarantee you anything back in those days. So I spent I went to boot camp and then got transferred over to Guam for 18 months, came back to what the Marine Corps calls the fleet, which is basically your infantry unit, and bothered the lieutenant who was in charge of me literally every day for 6 weeks to allow me to go to sniper school to try out for it. They let me in and I passed, and that was in July of 1990. And of course, August 2nd of 1990 is when Iraq invaded Kuwait. So by December 1st, we were on a ship headed to the Middle East. Spent 9 months over there, came back and got transferred to sniper school as an instructor and spent 3 years as an instructor at the 1st Marine Division Scout Sniper School.
I think Brian was also an instructor. Yeah, I believe he was. Did you have to shoot anybody, John?
No, what the big plan for us is we knew we'd take the desert really quick, but we thought the Iraqis would fight a lot harder for the city. So we had Kuwaiti advisors attached to our unit. And the idea was once we kind of surrounded Kuwait was to turn us loose. But we took the city so quick that we landed 12 hours after the war started in our Humvees. We chased the war across the desert for a day and a half and could never catch it. By the time we got to Baghdad, the war was over. I mean, don't forget, the war I was in was over in 100 hours. It was like a big field exercise.
Yeah.
The Iraqis were out in the open. The Air Force and the Marine Corps bombed them for 6 straight weeks before we even kicked off any combat operations. And we cut the mission short as compared to Greg and those guys who had to go in and do house-to-house clearing. The second time around was a much more brutal, much more involved exercise than what we did.
Yeah. And,
much more.
And even the second time around, if you guys remember, we invaded Iraq. It was March 19th, 2003. And it was similar. Like the actual army of Iraq, Saddam's army, didn't give too much resistance. It was pretty easy fighting. it wasn't until the insurgency rose in late 2004 that things really started to kick off there. So, I mean, that's what happens when we stayed there and we occupied it, and it gave them time to reconfigure and come up with game plans. And they started just poking a little bit and seeing what they could get away with, mainly IEDs and indirect. And I think they realized that our responses were a lot less than they anticipated. And it just got completely out of control in a hurry.
Yeah, plus the environment is so much more advantageous for them.
Yeah.
Compared to if you meet us in a conventional warfare out in the middle of the desert, you're going to get your ass kicked brutally.
Yep.
If you're dressing like a civilian in the daytime and running around at night doing your, scandalous behaviors, it's really tough for an occupying army.
It's so hard.
It's so
hard.
Hard.
I personally saw them using women, using children to implant IEDs. And I mean, it's just a completely different mentality. And
yeah. Plus the rules of warfare were much different. World War II style warfare, we just bombed all their cities, like we did Dresden and Berlin and Tokyo. And we tried so hard not to kill any women and children and innocent people that it makes it a much more difficult task.
Yeah, I remember when I was in Ramadi, that was a Marine controlled area, all of Anbar, and it was 2-4 Marines out there. And those kids would have a new ROE issued to them daily.
That's rules of engagement.
Rules of engagement. At 6 a.m., the command staff would issue whatever the ROE of the day was. And you got to remember, these kids are out in the city for months on end.
Well, they're 18, 19 years old.
Getting shot at.
Getting shot at, and they get the rules changed on them every day.
And then they're held to that standard.
Yeah, and if you screw up, you might get prosecuted.
Yep. So, yeah, there's a lot of things happening over there that, in my opinion, could have been handled a lot better. Like, if you want to go in and you want to win, then you have to understand that there's going to be a lot of collateral damage and there's going to be a lot of loss of human life. And if you're not willing to accept that, then don't send people to war. It's that simple.
Well, a ton about it, but Fallujah the second time around.
Mm-hmm.
Why those Marines had to go in there and clear every single building.
Yep.
And you just simply issue an order. Look, civilians, get out, and you just level the city.
Yep.
No, Marines should be in there dying, clearing buildings.
And they actually did that. They leafleted the city, and it said, we are going to launch an offensive and blah, 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 basically just showing our hand. And so they were hoping that would get all the civilians out of the city. But regardless if it did or if it didn't, what it also did is allowed the enemy to dig in like ticks and build
like big time, yeah.
And I had 2 buddies killed going into a room, and there was a full-on machine gun bunker built inside of a bedroom with full sandbags and stuff. Just poor tactics, No,
you just fly your B-52s over and you drop 1,000-pound bombs until the city's nothing left but a parking lot.
Yep, and then the Marines can go in and do a BDA or a battle damage assessment, Yep.
Find all the body chunks.
Yeah.
So, John,
politicians in control of that type of stuff.
Yep.
Looking at your background there, I see weapons right there. I'm just trying to understand if you're trying to intimidate me or something. Can you explain that?
I love shooting. So I'm down in my gun room right now. I am mostly retired. So now I spend most of my time shooting and hang out with my kids and loading ammo. And
what are you shooting?
What kind of rifle or what animals?
Oh, animals. Oh, I thought you meant people.
Yeah, no.
Maybe a couple liberal Democrats you might be shooting at.
No, I have no idea, or I have no desire to shoot liberal Democrats. I would prefer to change their minds because they're generally wrong about their politics.
Yeah,
they're just wrong.
So tell us what type of guns you got up there.
Those are 4 different rifles. From top to bottom is an AR-15 platform, but it's a Wilson custom-made rifle in what's called the calibers of 260. Below that, the green one is a hunting rifle. It's a 338-06. Below that is my primary hunting rifle. That's a 338 Lapua. on an improved version. So the bottom line is that third rifle down is accurate to a mile. And the one below that, I'm going to shoot in 2-mile competitions.
Wow. So what kind of, I don't really like, if I had to hunt for my own food, I couldn't do it. I'd
You
have
know
to
me. Just come to get your ass to Washington State. I'll take care of you, brother. Be all right.
I'd have to hire somebody to get my food for me. But, so you're saying you can shoot an animal 2 miles away?
No, I wouldn't do that. It's accurate to that distance, but there's 2-mile competitions. It's not a one shot, one kill at 2 miles for sure. But today's sniper technology with the rifles that they have, and more importantly, the ballistic computers that they have, one shot, one hit kills at 1,000 yards are not that difficult. And at 1,500 yards to a mile, as long as the atmospheric conditions are cooperative, meaning not real high winds, something like that, pretty damn doable. I wouldn't want somebody shooting at me a mile away with some of the sniper rifles that the military has now.
Wow.
Yeah, there's been a lot of technological advancement in bullet design that's really increased the range of these rifles significantly. So
I think this is a true story, but remember when we had those pirates in off of the coast of Africa?
Yeah, one of the SEALs went in and rescued.
Yeah, is it true that these guys were like in the water with sniper rifles, and then they popped up and shot these guys?
No, that's inaccurate.
Okay.
They were on another vessel, and they used that vessel as their shooting platform.
And so they were just far enough away where people couldn't see them, or?
From what I understand, and I mean, I might be butchering this, but I have a lot of friends in the SEAL community. From what I understand is that the boat that they actually took over ran out of gas, and they were towing that in with an American vessel. So,
too.
And so that gave the SEALs, I mean, I don't know how far away the boat was, but if they're towing it, it's not that far. But they still had him as a hostage on that vessel. And so that's when they waited till the cover of darkness, and then they used their night vision and their IR capabilities and engaged from the other boat, which would be an awesome mission.
Right? Yep, sure would.
That's pretty incredible with the technology that we have nowadays. I mean, I can imagine like in the next 20 years that we won't need, I shouldn't say we won't need, but you can have like some virtual snipers out there. You know what I mean? You just maybe have some robots.
Well, you can see the role that the drones have played in the last 15 years of combat. It's a game changer,
Yep, for sure. Yep, arming those things in some type of a big fleet would not be all that difficult.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say it that way. Okay, so you're out there in Fallujah or wherever. What are you eating at the time?
It depends. There's still a lot of little like bases and combat outposts. Like Camp Fallujah was a mile outside of the city of Fallujah. I spent a lot of time there. And there's Camp Al-Ramadi and Blue Diamond combat outposts. And the military actually has like these little chow halls that they'll set up and, just serve you the normal military meals. The only guys that are just living on the MREs are when you're actually out on an active patrol.
Yeah, and the newer style MREs aren't bad.
Mm-hmm.
I use them now when I go hunting and camping sometimes, and they're totally edible. Well, back in my day, right? They weren't as good as they are now, but they were edible. And nowadays, with the little heat packs in them and stuff, they're fine.
What's the MRE?
It's a meal ready to eat. Is a military ration. It just comes in a package that's like, like half the size of like a shoebox.
And what's in it?
It's just calorically dense foods. So
in a variety.
Yeah.
There's like 12 or so different meals, everything from omelets to spaghetti to stews to soups to crackers and peanut butter and jellies and coffee and salt and just basic stuff.
And so when you go to the mess hall, what do they have there?
It'd just be like,
Typical cafeteria type stuff.
yeah, like hash browns, scrambled eggs, bacon, and sausage.
Hamburgers,
Yeah.
lasagna.
Oh, so when you get back to the United States, is there anything that you've missed? I mean, like,
Not. It depends on the deployment. I did a deployment to Afghanistan where I was living in the mountains for all 6 months. And those kind of deployments, yeah, you miss home and you're thinking about mom's cooking and stuff constantly.
Do you guys get hot meals up there very often, Greg?
Every once in a while, they'd fly out those like mermites and they would have hot chow. But the majority of that was MREs. And then the other ones, the freeze-dried ones, we have to add water. I don't remember.
That would get old after.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would get old. Yeah. MREs are okay, but I wouldn't want to live on them for weeks at a time.
Yeah. But after the war had kicked off in Iraq for a while, I remember some of the chow halls in Iraq, like I was eating better when I was deployed than when I was home,
Oh yeah. I'll tell you, particularly Air Force chow halls.
Yep, exactly.
Oh man, they're that's like going to a nice restaurant.
Yep, and not just better, but healthier. Like I remember I got in some of the best shape of my life on deployments because you do missions, however many missions you have during a day, but a lot of times you're doing nothing. And there was deployments where, especially when you're filling a billet called QRF, Quick Reaction Force, which means you're just on standby for something to go bad. And so you're literally just at the airfield all day waiting for something. And you're just reading books and working out. And at the time, eating healthy foods too. So it was actually a good opportunity to get really healthy and fit.
so if you're out on a mission, like you're out in the mountains, like you said you were you like waiting to get somebody, or were you just watching?
I was deployed to Afghanistan for 6 months, and I didn't fire my rifle one time. The whole purpose of our mission, we were in a safe house in a little city called Bari Kaut, Afghanistan.
Now, you were a ranger at the time?
Yes, as a ranger at the time. And it's a little north of a place called Asadabad. If anyone's listening, a lot more people are familiar with that place. And our whole mission was just to identify routes that people are using to go in and out of Pakistan, because we were supposed to be hands off if they were in Pakistan. And
you guys were doing like OPs probably, or?
Yep, exactly. We'd set in OPs and we'd just watch ridge lines and watch the draws that were coming down the mountains. And, there was a couple little skirmishes here and there, a couple IEDs, but yeah.
Did you guys call fire on those guys, or just report back to?
Just report back, They called for fire a couple times when different patrols out from the platoon that I wasn't on. But yeah, it was pretty slow. And it was actually interesting because I had done another deployment before that, which was also relatively slow. And I started to get in my mind like, this combat stuff's
boring.
We just go there and work out and hang out. It wasn't until I got to Ramadi when it was like, oh, okay, this is, it just depends. It's where you're at and what's going on. And it's just luck of the draw of if you get to get it on or not. But
so what would you rather do? Would you rather be in that same situation where nothing was happening, or where you're getting shot at and back? Or
I'll tell you, most Rangers, and the same goes for most Marines, you want to get it on because you've put so much of your blood, sweat, and tears into training. And then you also have an enemy
that's the big thing right there. Yeah. You want to kill these guys.
Yeah. I mean, they brought the fight to us. Yep. So the Ranger mentality was like, we can't fucking wait to find them, know? And so, and I tell people too, combat is fun. Can I don't know if that's like,
can I stop you right there?
I don't know if that's go ahead.
So we went this whole podcast without anybody using any curse words.
Oh, sorry.
Now you have just made us have to market, crazy content. They say I get better ratings that way.
I apologize.
Don't worry about it. I'm just joking. I'm sorry for cutting you off. Go ahead.
No, I
just thought it was funny.
I was just saying, like, combat is, like, men have this inherent desire to compete against each other. That's why we play sports. That's why we do jiu-jitsu. That's just in our DNA. And combat is that at the highest level. And when you're out on a rooftop and some guy's shooting at you and you're trying to find where it's coming from, like it's exciting. It's exhilarating, you know? And from my experience, I didn't see a lot of people feeling fear or like being scared. Most of the men that I was with, and mind you, a lot of these guys were Marines. 2-4 Marines are the biggest group of savages I've ever met in my life. Because no matter how bad things got, they just wanted to get it on and get more and give it back to them. And yeah, I mean, there's some crazy ups and downs. Obviously, losing guys, it's the worst thing you'll ever go through. But the other side of that is it's an experience that a lot of guys really enjoyed too. And I don't think that it's bad to enjoy that. You train, you spend all this time. These are the enemies of our country. Then they send you over there. You have to live over there for months, or for some guys, years at a time. You should be able to find enjoyment in that. If you're not, it's going to be a long, rough deployment, you know?
Particularly with such a well-defined enemy.
Yep.
Guys who really need killed.
Yep.
Yep.
And it's easy for us also to like classify them as basically subhuman when you see the type of things that they do to people, using women as shields, and like I said, having children carrying their IEDs and stuff. Like, no remorse for those type of men.
Nope, none.
John, what about you? Did you spend time just sitting there thinking, I wish I could shoot something? I shouldn't say it that way. But were you ever at a point where you're just sitting there like, I wish I could do something?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Because like I said, when the invasion of Iraq was March 19th, 2003, I was in Afghanistan. And so we got to hear about the rest of the Ranger Regiment invading Iraq and mixing it up. And we're just like, oh, we're stuck out in the mountains trying to identify routes. And then these guys are doing direct action raids on Uday and Kusay and all those guys, you know? So yeah, you want that for sure.
John?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was looking forward to employing the skills that I had learned as a Marine sniper.
So you wanted to shoot somebody like 2 miles away?
Not somebody.
Yeah.
I wanted to shoot
Some
the
people.
guys that were the cause of us being over there, for sure.
And contrary to popular belief too, and I didn't see this in Iraq as much as I saw it in Afghanistan, the local population didn't want them there any more than we wanted them there. Like, the Taliban decimated that country, and they took away their abilities to go to schools, and they took away like all their women's rights, and they ruled with all these crazy harsh rules where if you went against them, we heard stories about the Taliban coming into cities and killing all the kids or killing all the village elders. And I remember we used to have people getting in fights when we would patrol through their city on who got to present dinner to us that night as a way of saying thank you to America. So yeah, it was pretty cool. Afghanistan was really cool. I always tell people if it's ever safe, if for like, you know, in 20 years, if this war somehow comes to an end, Afghanistan is a beautiful place to visit. And the overwhelming majority of the culture is very friendly. Like, I really enjoyed that deployment.
Yeah, we were greeted like conquering heroes when we rolled into Kuwait. I was in Kuwait City a few days after the war ended, and they did everything but have parades for us, and they were waving American flags, and they were thrilled to have us there because the Iraqis were so brutal to them when they came in and took over Kuwait.
That is very crazy. I can't imagine it. I watched a show called, what the hell is it called? It's on Showtime. It's about a lady working in the CIA. Nobody watches that? Well, anyway,
Yeah, I'm not familiar.
last episode they showed her walking through Pakistan. So I'm assuming, I don't know anything about being over there, but I'm assuming Afghanistan and Pakistan are similar. I have no idea. But they were like walking around in the city, and like everybody has machine guns, and people are selling machine guns. It's like a flea market with just machine guns everywhere, and people are just shooting up in the air, showing, you know, how easy it is or whatever. Is there any truth to that, or does that sound familiar?
I mean, I haven't seen that personally, but the other side of that is weapons are very easily obtained over there. You know, everybody in Iraq had an AK-47. And even in Afghanistan, even people that we would consider good guys, you saw lots of people with PKMs and RPGs and stuff because they just set up their own local little security elements or police forces. And yeah, weapons are just a part of their culture. You know, like it's not uncommon to be at a bazaar where they're selling meats and foods and stuff. And yeah, there's guys standing there with machine guns. Like law enforcement across a whole in third world countries are very heavily armed. It's only in America where people think it's weird because I'm a police officer now. And when citizens see me with my AR-15, they think like the end of the world's coming or something.
How did you become a cop?
Oh, that's another long story. So I was deployed and I was in Iraq in 2009. And my wife sent me a email with a picture of the ultrasound test. And she's like, hey, I'm pregnant. And I'm like, okay. Wasn't expecting that because we weren't, you know, it was an accident. We weren't expecting to have kids for a while. And she goes, you got to put this deploying stuff behind you. Like if we're going to do a family now, I can't have you gone 6 to 9 months out of the year. And so I ended up getting, and that was when I was contracting. Remember I said I went to contracting after I got out of the military. So that's what made me leave the contracting world. And I was like, well, what am I going to do back home? You know? So I started looking into different agencies and I actually went federal first. That's what brought me to Los Angeles. I was with the Marshal Service and out of Los Angeles. And I was with them for 4.5 years. And then I really realized like in my experience, federal law enforcement is not the tip of the spear like all the movies and shows want you to believe. And I ended up switching from feds to a local agency. So I'm just a local police officer now here in the state of Washington.
You work for a city or you're a deputy?
No, the Port of Seattle.
Okay.
Yep. It's a small agency. We only have like 100 officers. And it's funny, when I first got approached about it, I was like, I'm not leaving the U.S. Marshals to be an airport cop, you know? But after I looked into it, it's a great agency. And it's, and everybody will tell you that this isn't the agency to be part of if you want to be on the SWAT team, kicking doors and doing all that stuff. But if you've got that out of your system and you enjoy like good camaraderie, good pay, good benefits, good schedule. Like I worked 3 days on, 4 days off as a police officer. That's almost a firefighter schedule, you know? And so, yeah, I couldn't be happier. I've been with the Port for 3 years now.
Yeah, good for you.
What do the federal marshals actually do? I mean, it seems, weren't they the ones in that movie? What's his name? What's the guy with three names?
The Fugitive?
Fugitive.
Tommy Lee Jones?
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that was the U.S. Marshals. So here's the thing about the U.S. Marshals. They're like any agency. They have some really good aspects and they have some really bad aspects. And some offices are run great and then some offices have poor leadership. But from my experience, I was on the special response team and got to do like the high value target raids and all the cool stuff. But the cool stuff would happen about once a month. Outside of that, it was prisoner transports. It was taking prisoners to their medical appointments, and it was sitting in courthouses because you have to have physical security of a prisoner while they're at their court hearings. And that was the overwhelming majority of your time spent inside the courthouse or inside the jails. And I just realized that this isn't something that I want to spend 25 years doing.
Let me ask you another question. I have always heard that federal marshals make the same pay everywhere in the United States. So, like, if you're a federal marshal in Missouri, you still make $50,000. If you're in Los Angeles, you make $50,000. Is that true?
Well, your base pay is the same. It's the GS rating, so it's a GS whatever. I was a GS 12 when I got out. Like that base pay is the same, but then they have COLA, like cost of living expense, based on what city you're at. Okay. So since I was stationed in Los Angeles, they give you an additional stipend because it's understood the cost of living out there is more than wherever else. And each city across America has a COLA rating that the federal government will assign to their agents or their deputies. And then you get that pay increase. But it's not much. I mean, I was a marshal in Los Angeles making like 60 something. and I think I would have qualified for food stamps.
I'm gonna have to end it right now.
Let me ask John one question real quick.
Sure, sure.
Do you know a guy named Heist or Heisterman?
No.
No? Okay. Maybe he was after your time, but he was high up in the cadre of sniper school for a long time. And then he contracted with me for a while. So
Yeah, I got out of the Marine Corps in November of '94.
okay. Yeah, probably a little ahead of your time then. Thought I'd ask. It's funny, like people think that everyone in the military knows each other, which is kind of ridiculous. But then every once in a while, it's like, oh yeah, that's what, you know.
Yeah, well, the Marine sniper community is pretty small. There's only
Yeah.
around 250 Marine snipers on active duty at any one time.
Yeah. I also have to tell you, I went to Pendleton and attended the Marine Corps pre-scout sniper course.
Oh, cool.
Not the shooting course, just the land
Right.
nav portion of it.
Yeah.
And to this day, I tell everybody, because I was really good at land nav. I prided myself on that as a ranger. That course, that crushes everybody. That's the hardest land nav I've ever experienced.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I believe it. Yeah.
So,
Well,
all right, Kenny.
let me
you can
just
close it up
right now, but don't hang up. I want to talk to you guys for a quick second. Do you guys have any sponsors you want to pump out or anything? John, don't you have a business that you want to put up?
Yeah, sure. That's a great idea, Kenny. Thanks. Thanks for the plug, brother. I own Spokane NutriShop and cryotherapy. So if you're looking for some top-end supplements, protein powders, pre-workouts, BCAAs, etc., just get a hold of me at SpokaneNutriShop.com.
Okay, I gotta thank. Who do I gotta thank? Iron Lion Soap, Road Dog Kimonos, and Luta Fight Gear, and Felicia, my partner. She's somewhere in quarantine, and that's it until the next time. Say adios, gentlemen.
all right. Thanks for having me. Have a good one, guys.
Adios.